welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And this is kind of a special one because for the longest time I thought Lucio Fulci only had 5 Giallo. I thought he had Lizard Woman's Skin, Don't Torture a Duckling, The Psychic, New York Ripper, and Murder Rock, which I have reviewed all those, but it wasn't until recently that I find out there was another one, and it was actually his first ever Giallo. So the last one I'm getting to is the first one he ever did, and it's 1969's Perversion story, aka One on Top of the Other, which this is one of those Gialli where its alternate title is just as popular and well known as its other title. Which the same year, 1969, there was a Spanish-Italian Giallo called Temptations in the Apocalypse, which is also known as Perversion story. What is the most incredible thing a woman ever did for $1 million? This movie will tell us. And not only was this his first Giallo, this was his first time he ever delved into thriller of any kind. I mean, before this, he did a lot of television, but he was mostly known for westerns and musical comedies and even family films. So with this, this was really the beginning of the Fulci horror fans know of now. It's the Pre-Argento era, so that really had to be interested as well. Like, okay, the formula of 60s Giallo, how will Fulci tackle that? And I thought he did it very, very well. This movie is very stylish. It does have some great stylistic shots and direction. The performances are well done. Sorry, my nose keeps dripping. Starting to get colder out, and allergies still suck. But also the editing and just the arrangement of scenes and how suspenseful the end is, very well done. I wonder if this was one of the ones that he co-wrote with one of his frequent co-writers. Well, it stars Gene Sorrell, who's been in a number of Gialli. My favorite of his probably being Short Nine of Glass Dolls, which this one kind of reminded me of, or at least towards the end. Marissa Mell, Elsa Martinelli, Alberto Di Mendoza, and John Ireland. It also takes place in San Francisco, which I think Fulci is one of the very few that actually has set a Giallo in America. The music is by Ritz Ortolani, and I do like the score. The main titles and some of the pieces are very jazzy. Those were kind of obnoxious at times, but during the more either erotic or suspenseful scenes, it's got this low-key sort of Dwayne Eddy twang type of guitar, almost like a western. But in the context of the scenes that it's in these, it's very effective, and I really like those parts of the score. But it was written by Fulci, Roberto Gianviti, and Jose Luis Martinez Mola. So, not his usual co-writers. And it was actually shot in San Quentin State Prison and the gas chamber, which Richard Ramirez was sentenced to die in, but of course he never did, and he passed away in the summer of 2013. Also, side note, Gene Sorrell's lawyer in this, the character's name, his attorney is Arthur Mitchell, name of the Trinity Killer in Dexter. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, obviously this movie has sorry, a lot that it was inspired by and what it inspired. Hugely inspired by films like Vertigo and I think Hitchcock as a whole, but also this has been considered sort of a precursor to movies like Basic Instinct and Body of Evidence, and maybe even to some extent, maybe like Fatal Attraction, just sort of the really like convoluted plots a woman might go to for, you know, murder, revenge, for profit, or whatever. So, I haven't seen Body of Evidence. I saw Basic Instinct years ago, and I can see the influence after seeing this. Pretty much the erotic thriller. And yeah, this one is, I mean, leave it to Fulci. This is one of the most erotic of the era. I mean, of the 60s. With some great stylistic shots. I mean, there's even a mattress POV, which I'm sure how they did it was like a glass or plastic bed with the characters on top, camera pointing up. But there's like see-through red and pink sheets. So we see them doing their thing through the see-through bed, through the see-through sheets. Very stylish. I thought that was very interesting. There's also some panel shots, almost like a comic book, with a bunch of different colors in them. I thought that was great. Also, some of the scenes in the Roaring Twenties Club, where our female lead works as a stripper. Great set design, and just, it's a very stylish film. And this is the Mondo Macabro Blu-ray, which I think they were also the ones that put out the Unseen, which I have. It's either the Unseen or Fade to Black, or even both. But on November 9th, they're putting out a Blu-ray of The Designated Victim, which is another Giallo that I have to get. And just to show it, this came in today, and I'm very excited. Argento's Trauma, which is probably Argento's hardest to find film next to Four Flies on Grey Velvet. So even though I don't own Sleepless, I have reviewed it. So this is the last one I need to do all Argento's Giallo films. Still need his Dracula film though, as bad as it is. So, excited for that. But anyway, back to Perversion Story. There was something else I was gonna say about this before I got into like the. Anyway, so, and this isn't a body count Giallo. It is what like you would see in the 60s, a wealthy person and sort of this murder case surrounding them, and maybe their perversions and wrongdoings, certain philias or whatever is explored throughout the case. And another thing that was very interesting was we find out who the killer is, and I was like, it's over already? I thought it was 108 minutes. I looked, and it was like another 20 minutes after the killer revealed itself. I'm gonna say itself because I don't want to spoil it. But so even though we know who the killer is that early on, and then it's a race against the clock so that the killer can be found in time, you know, it's one of those. So it's not, and also, even though it's not a blood and gore film, which even Lizard and Woman's Skin and Don't Torture a Duckling really aren't either. There's like a scene or so in each. This one does have a scene with a body that's been exhumed, and the effects on that are pretty fair, I'll say. And it is all centered around one murder. And basically, Gene Sorrell plays this guy, George Demurier, who's this doctor who owns this clinic, or it was handed down to him. And he's known for these sensational stories, like these heart transplants that I guess end up not being true. But his wife, played by Marissa Mell, they have a very estranged and contentious relationship. He's always on business trips, and sometimes when he is home, she locks herself in her bedroom for days. She becomes very sick. She has asthma. Then he hires this new nurse, and then he's away with his lover named Janet, who was played by, and she actually looked familiar too, or Jane, I should say, Elsa Martinelli. I know I've seen that name and some other reviews all the way back to the 50s. The 10th Victim, I think that's a Giallo. But she was in that. She was in this film called Candy from 1968, which I guess is supposed to be really good. Okay, so maybe I haven't. But anyway. And then he gets a call saying his wife has passed. And there is a scene that kind of foreshadows, because he shows the nurse asthma meds, sedative for nighttime. And it's very dangerous for them to be mixed or to be given at the wrong time. So then he gets a phone call saying that his wife, Susan, has passed. And he seems pretty hurt by it. I mean, obviously, but given the fact that they have a bad relationship and he has a lover, which Jane, I think is like a producer or a manager of this photography studio that does nudes and stuff. But then he's with Jane, and he gets this call from this woman or he gets a call saying, come to the Roaring Twenties nightclub. So he does, and this woman named Monica does her dance, and he's floored because she looks just like Susan. Susan had dark hair and brown eyes. She has, bright blonde hair and green eyes, but could still be her twin. And then, he goes to stay the night with her, which has this scene that is probably one of the more famous images of the film, and it was a poster. Let's see where it is. This here has that scene, which, oh yeah, Perversion is another title, but and then just there was no Wikipedia to kind of help me with the plot, and there is a lot that goes on to it, but and I didn't start taking notes with this one. But eventually, he then finds out that she left him, his wife had left him a $2 million insurance policy. Which, again, the subtitles is kind of weird because it's going by the Italian script, I guess. Like, when he first calls Monica, she asks, how did you get my unlisted number? He says, I bought it. She asks how much. He says, $150, but the subtitles say 200. I think the subtitles said 1 million, but I think they say 2 million. A huge insurance policy that he knew nothing about. So because there was this huge insurance payout, they believe he killed his wife. So now he has to pretty much prove his innocence. And there's some side stuff, like she's got this crazy older guy that's madly in love with her named Benjamin, which throughout the film, each time he comes up, he seems crazier and crazier because she's leaving him. There's George's brother, Henry. We do get some procedural stuff, like the inspectors strongly believe George did it. Throughout a good portion of it, Monica's being questioned, and it seems like she's throwing George under the bus for a lot of it. And we do see a lot of I guess this didn't come out till 1973 in the States, which I know was common. Giallo typically didn't come out till years later. But like they ransack her apartment and they find like an envelope of $20,000. They find a paper towel with a bunch of scribbles that looks like practice of how to forge Susan's signature. And she pretty much says that she was getting information from this woman named Betty, which the first kind of twist, I guess, that's not really a twist, but the first kind of, hey, something could be weird here, is when he first stays with Monica, and then her friend comes over, and I think he's getting ready to answer the door, and there's a bottle of Neuracidin there, which is one of the medications that he showed the nurse that could be potentially fatal if not taken carefully. And then after they have sex, he mentions the cigarettes. She says she doesn't smoke. And he says, oh yeah, people with asthma can't smoke. As if hinting, are you know. But then her friend comes in the room and says she needs her asthma meds. But there are the twists and turns are very good. I mean, for a while it does look like it could be this person. There is a great scene, I will say, with her and Jane that really kind of, from the beginning of the scene to the ending, you're thinking multiple different things about where the film's gonna go. And then, like I said, I mean, you find out with 20 minutes left who the killer is, and then that last 20 minutes is a race against the clock. And the way the final few scenes are placed, like even the last 5 minutes, it keeps going back and forth for how you think it's going to end. Very well done. I would have to say, for Fulci's first ever Giallo, this is one of his better ones. I mean, I would put this over Murder Rock. I might put this over The Psychic. New York Ripper is on. That's definitely more sleazy than erotic, but that was one of the first Giallo I ever saw, so there's some nostalgia value. Also, it's one of the goriest and bloodiest. I would say it's up there with this Lizard and Duckling. I think his first three might actually be his best three. I was actually pretty surprised by this. It is kind of slow at times, but the whole second half is very well executed. And again, those scenes with like the Dwayne Eddy kind of low-key twang as the music really helps the atmosphere and tone. Also, when it does like the comic panel shots of like the forensics laboratory with all the beakers and everything, lots of different colors, almost like an Argento color scheme. Yeah, and you can also see the Hitchcock reference or inspiration. But yeah, I'm gonna get into spoilers, but definitely recommend this. I think for a while this kind of goes off as one of Fulci's forgotten films that people don't really talk about much. But I would say it is one of his best. It's the one that really, as it went on, kept making me go, "Oh, what? It's going that way," which hasn't happened in a while with these Giallo films. But yeah, highly recommend it. But I'm gonna get to spoilers, so uh, yeah, Perversion Story, definitely one of his best films. So the smoking gun that puts George in prison is at one point when Monica goes deeper into her her story, which we don't hear, but it shows them ransacking her apartment again. That's where they find the envelope with a shit ton of money in it. And then when George is being questioned, and also this is after they find the paper towel with the Susan's signature all over it, which they found in her apartment. Supposedly, the story was, or they think he paid her the money, and the thing was they were gonna test the envelope for fingerprints, and if they were his, they were gonna send him away. And there was a lot that went on in this, so I'm gonna try to remember. But as he's sitting on death row, because apparently back then, or Fulci seems to think, like, just found guilty of murder, you're gonna get executed the next day, because he's on death row, and they gotta fight for a 24-hour deferral to get one more day. Then he's gonna be executed in the gas chamber. But before I go further, was there anything? So there's like the paper towel. There was the envelope full of money. There is the part where they do exhume Susan's body. That's when we see her all decomposed. And her sister Martha immediately says, yes, that's her. Jane and George and Jane's partner, Larry, the photographer, they want to find this one woman who they're doing slides, and randomly they see this one woman who they don't know, or don't know personally, don't know her name, but it looks like the nurse from the beginning. Which actually, I don't know if you can see it, but it's that picture. And so Larry sets up the shoot with her, and then she's pretty much interrogated in the dark by Jane. And this is the first time I noticed that low-key, twangy score. And I mean, she's like straddling her, getting close to her face. Think like Catwoman in like Batman Returns, that scene when she's like on top of him this close to her face, his face. And then she puts her slides on and it shows her. And she's asking her who this woman is. And she tells her she knows all this information about Monica. Like, I know you used to work here. I know you know her. I know you know the woman that... Oh, because when George was with her, there was a phone call. And it was Jane asking for this one woman, Carol. Which was a trick to see if it was Susan. Because, and she immediately said, no, I don't know no Carol. It was a trick that she knew how to get people to see if they are who they are. Because George and Jane pretty much always suspected that she is Susan. Or to an extent they do. So then after that, I know you worked here, here, and here. I know you know the woman in the picture. And they get a name, but they find out that she's missing. So it looks really bad. And then eventually, her bail is posted. That's when we get the scene with her and Benjamin. She tries to dump him. But then we see her flying to Paris. But she goes in the bathroom, and we just get the shot of the bathroom sink, and we see two green contacts fall in it. And I think she takes a blonde wig off, or she takes a hat off and lets her hair down. It's like she dyed it back. It's Susan. So yes, Monica and Susan are one. That was the case the whole time. She even gives the passport to the guy, and it's Susan's passport. And then we see George, his brother Henry, and his attorney in his cell, or this interrogation room. But it's like this amber colored glass door, or glass in between the bars, and that's what most of it is shot from the outside. I thought that was a nice shot. Also, during one of George's interrogation scenes, there's like a scene where there's this thing of water. It is like up close of the head inspector, but like the water's up to here, like the glass is in front of him, but the water's up to here, so his mouth looks larger. It doesn't look silly. It's interesting, to say the least. But this is when Henry confesses to him, Susan is still alive, and I am her lover, and we planned this whole thing. And the reason why the nurse went missing is because she is buried in Susan's place. And Susan has long faked her asthma attacks, her health. When Henry first got home, when George first got home and saw her laying in bed, he was extremely tired from traveling. He was, overwhelmed that she was dead. He walked in for a second, saw her laying there, and then he left. And they switched the body with her because people at the morgue don't know the difference from this person or that person. And, every time George was on a business trip, she was working as a stripper. And all the time she locked herself in the bedroom, she was out as Monica. She was building a resume, building an audience. She was creating Monica as a real person. Every little detail, all the way down to the paper towel, to the money being found, and make sure it's an envelope with his prints on it, was planned. Also, like the stories that she gave police, everything was planned. And why she put that policy in his name was because then in his death, Henry gets it. But he knew he could just kill Henry himself because that would put blame on him. So in his words was, so I'll just have the state do it for free. And he says how he always hated him because when their dad died, Henry was left nothing. George was left the clinic, which is now, the clinic is like his whole life, everything he lives for. And so now Henry's pretty much saying, I'm going to have to sell it. And, because the policy is so big, it was able to pay the mortgages and everything else. He calls it an interest-free loan. And I like the line George says, the interest is my life. So he did it out of hatred. Oh, and also he says, Susan needs money to be happy, which is why you took her from me. And I've always loved her. It's this long confession, but I like how it's acted. And you can really feel the spite and the hatred coming out of Henry. And you really believe Gene Sorrell as he's just staring at his brother, telling him all this awful shit. And the reason why, and also the whole thing that he and the clinic were known for these sensational, not true stories, which means that any story George comes up with about his innocence, no one will believe. I loved that twist. I loved that whole revelation. Normally with Giallo, you find who the killer is within a few minutes. The movie's probably going to end. The killer's going to be killed, and it's going to end. But there's 20 more minutes left, and so that's what I mean by race against the clock, because now he has until 10 a.m. Like, first, is he going to get the 24-hour extension? He does. But then it's like, I have until 10 a.m. for someone to find something out and that phone to ring, or else I'm going to be executed. So it is a lot like, or it reminded me of Short Night of Glass Dolls, which Gene Sorrell is also great in, because it's like can he wake up or do something before his autopsy to show people he's still alive? So, but his attorney believes Henry was probably behind everything, because things now aren't adding up, because now Henry is MIA, Monica is MIA, and they think it's kind of suspicious. So people start looking into it. And then they decide to, which the one convenience I will say was that the mortician is looking at these two photos of the nurse and Susan, and he says he can't tell which was which, even though the body was not decomposed the first time he saw her. But he says, if you exhume the body again, I can get a mold of the teeth, and I can match the dental records. And again, this is all part of like the last few minutes where you're just wondering which way is it going to go. Very suspenseful. And he says, this matches Susan. So you're thinking, oh God, he's not going to get saved. But then they notice that the dental records came from his family's clinic, so they think Henry just switched the records. But I think some of the best suspenseful and twisty editing is we see George being led into the gas chamber, and he's being suited up and strapped in. And then we see a news reporter saying, this is whoever from KPAT or whatever. I'm here in San Quentin's gas chamber where 24 hours ago today, and George DeBurrier, he tells the story of what happened. And then he says, and where he was sat in here and awaited his execution, making it sound like he already got it. But then we cut to France, where we also cut back to Henry like on a plane, making his way to meet up with Monica in France. But when he's on the plane, we see Benjamin is also there, and he's already made like threats that he's gonna kill her. So then after that news reporter makes it sound like George was executed, we see Henry and Susan meeting up at this diner in France. But then we see Benjamin stand up and he just says Monica, and he shoots both of them. But then we cut back to the radio reporter where he says that the people were, this American couple was identified. One was Henry, the other one was unknown, but they checked her passport. They saw it was issued to Susan. And so then the San Francisco police got a hold of that. They were able to put things together, and they were able to call the prison within literally the last few minutes. So by having that scene with the radio reporter making it sound like he got executed, or that he was executed, cutting to the rejoice of Henry and Susan, seeing them get killed, seeing them get their comeuppance, and then cutting back saying it was all fixed. Very suspenseful, very, well placed of editing and placement of scenes. I thought that was very well done. And it was such a almost like a relief, because you really do care about George throughout this film. He seems questionable in the beginning, but then just seeing how awful of a character Henry is, and Susan, and just how much they plotted against him just for money and out of spite, that you want to see them get it and George not get executed and them get away with it. That it literally ends with the reporter saying that phone call is what set George free. And then we just see the reporter walk out, and then we just get this the aerial shot of San Francisco. We don't even see George. It's just a relief hearing that everything worked out. So yeah, this was a very effective Giallo film. Certainly one of my favorites of the Pre-Argento era. Could be a contender for a top 10, maybe. But yeah, certainly if I was to do a top 10 between 1963 and 1970 or 1969, this would definitely be on there. It definitely had one of the most well thought out and pretty convoluted but very interesting twists and revelations. And again, the music is half of the music is great. It's very stylish. It does play around with its style and certain shots. The acting, very well done. The twists, the editing and placement of scenes to build the suspense and everything, well done. So this is the last Lucio Fulci Giallo film I had to review, but it was his very first one. Of the 6, I would put it in the upper 3. I really like Perversion story. But anyway, so that is it for Fulci Giallo films. I have a few more to get to, but now I have another Argento one to get to. So I think the next one I'm going to do is another Pre-Argento film, and it is The Murder Clinic. So stay tuned for that. And thank you for watching.